Heather, delighted to be chatting with you. Myself and Steve Evans there.
Hi, Heather. Good to meet you.
Hi, and you too. Thanks for having me.
Oh,
excellent, no problem. It's a pleasure, yeah.
It certainly is, yeah. Certainly for someone with such a back catalogue that you've got, 12 novels. Before we talk about your books though, Heather, tell us what you do outside of writing, if you've got any time.
It's a full time. Oh, right, yeah. Hobbies, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, not your writing, yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, well, I like to go to the theatre. I go for walks. I discovered painting during lockdown, so I've been doing a bit of that as well.
Oh, yeah.
And just the usual reading, of course. I don't think there's many authors that don't read. No. And just the usual going out and about, socialising, dining out, that sort of thing.
Full-time writer of 12 novels, which, as we mentioned, is pretty outstanding, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
You work with a publisher and an agent. I think you've got an agent. I can't remember the name of it.
I have, yeah.
Yeah. I wrote the name down and I can't remember.
Yeah, it's Joe Bell from Bell Lomax Morton.
That's it, Jobby Bell on Twitter.
Jobby Bell, yeah.
So did you find that very useful to contact with an agent and a publisher when you was writing, or how far were you into your books before you got involved with the publisher? Did you do it before you were starting to write, or as you were writing, or after 4, 5, 6 books or novels?
Right, so what happened with me, it goes back quite a way. Started writing over 20 years ago. I did a writing course after I'd had my children. I took some time out. I hated the job I was in. I was in credit control. I absolutely hated it. So it was a chance to sort of, I think when you're with children all day as well, you like to do something for yourself and keep your brain alive. Yeah. So I used to study in the evenings, and I did a writing course. It took me 3 years with don't mind if a name drop here, do you?
Oh, do it.
Right.
Oh, no.
In Manchester, who were absolutely brilliant. I'd recommend them to anybody. And the course at that time was really comprehensive. So they covered, as well as novels, it was short stories, articles, radio, to everything. So it did take a long time. And part of the course was to do the first 3 chapters and a synopsis of a novel and submit it to agents. So I did all that. And back then, it was before everything opened up on Amazon, all the Amazon Kindle. Yeah. So it was the long route where you sent everything off, you paid the postage, you paid return postage. You were only supposed to send one agent at a time. It was like protocol. They didn't like you sending to multiple agents, and it was an absolute drag, to be honest. And in the end, I got fed up of it. But aside from that, the novel, I got so far with it, and it was really going nowhere. So I just put it to one side, carried on with the writing, doing sort of trade magazine articles, a few women's magazines, that sort of thing. And then eventually, a few years later, I picked it back up again, and I thought, this needs a bit of oomph. So I turned it into a crime novel. I just asked, what if something was to happen to these characters that was absolutely devastating? So I picked it back up. It became a crime novel. And what happened was I published the first trilogy, independently in 2014, 15 and 16. They then got spotted by a publisher on Amazon because I'd done a promotion that sort of made them rise in the ranks. And they subsequently republished them after I'd done my first trilogy with them, the Manchester Trilogy. They then wanted the Riverhill Trilogy as well. So yeah, I've not done the 12 books as quickly as you thought. Okay. Because they were originally published 14, 15 and 16. Yeah. So it's like 12 books in 8 years, so it's still not bad going.
Still impressive, isn't it? Still fairly impressive, isn't it? Yeah.
So I got the publisher first, and then when I got about half a dozen books out, it was always the thing. Everybody said, "Oh, you need an agent." So I thought, well, I'll have another go, and I was quite known by then. I'd got about half a dozen books out. Wrote to about a dozen agents by email this time, and nothing whatsoever again. So I gave up on it. I thought, well, I'm happy with my publishers. And then I happened to go to a party that the publishers hosted, and they had agents there. And I just got chatting to Joe Bell and said, oh, I'm looking for an agent. So So that was that. So I met the publisher first and then the agent off the back of that.
Usually the way
Sorry,
round.
that was a bit of a lengthy story, wasn't it?
No,
But
not at all. No, it's usually an agent first, and then they connect you with the publisher.
yeah, I found it really, really hard to get an agent. I believe now that there are, I know I was watching Sarah's the other day and she did mention it when I've met her previously, there are different avenues you can go to now to find an agent, aren't there?
Yeah.
But I wasn't aware of any of this, you see, so I did it all the long-winded way. And I think my letters just went into the slush pile and never got looked at. I think when I did the dozen, I got about 2 response. I got 1 response, and that was that. So yeah, I don't think they're even looked at, to be honest.
Okay. So now we know the secret. Then you find out which parties they go to. You gate crash the parties. See, yeah, I'm a writer. So it's done.
Well, they do say a lot of the festivals now. People pitch and everything, don't they, to them?
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
So.
I've been reading Sapphire, and this is book 6 in the Working Girl series.
No, this is 5, Sapphire. That's the one I published in January. And then the book that's going out in August is a spin-off, although the publishers have put it as book 6 on Amazon. So it is a bit confusing, but it is based on the series Guilt.
Okay.
But yeah, Sapphire was the last one I did in January.
I was going to ask you about the location. Are all of your books that are around the Manchester area, around the Gorton area where you were brought up? And
it's, well, Gorton I lived till I was 13. A lot of them I then moved to another area, which I probably won't mention because that's where the gangs moved in after I'd moved out. And I base a lot of it. I think I based more of it on that area than the Gorton, because there was just, it was a shocker really when I moved there. I mean, Gorton's got a reputation now, but I was brought up in a 2 up, 2 down. We'd not known anything any different, and we didn't think of it as a rough area. But then when I moved to this other area, oh my God, yeah, that was a rude awakening. That. But there were some real characters, and I've not based any of my books on specific characters, but I kind of take different facets of, different characteristics and meld them into, sort of the characters in my books.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, are some of your dramas and your books written about the realistic areas that you lived in at the time, where hard life areas of Gorton and, where Shameless was filmed and all around there? Was it? That's what it's about. But you've just said you didn't use characters. You used some of the sketches, I suppose, out of those, or things that happened in that time.
I do both. I take characteristics of people I've met over time, but I also include real life events in the books. So in the trilogies, for example, there's the gang wars that took place in Manchester. I think I've done the 96 bomb. So I've taken my characters as being, there in Manchester when the bomb occurred. So
at the Arndale Centre.
Yeah. The first one, not the one at the concert, the first one in 96. Yeah, so I do include a lot of events, and the Working Girls series, there's a story, quite a lengthy story of how that came about. I don't know if half an hour is going to be enough, to be honest. But, I did a lot of research, not just videos and books of, working girls and things, but I went to see a couple of charities in the city centre as well, for a lot of the background information to try and make it a realistic depiction of how people live. And particularly in Sapphire, I think from my research with the charities, there's a lot of these kids that have grown up in care or whatever, and they kind of drift into this lifestyle, drugs, prostitution, when they're only young, and they kind of follow the wrong route because they've never known any different, or they've been groomed by older kids in the homes and this sort of thing. So it was good to do that research. And sorry, I've gone off at a tangent a bit.
Not at all, no.
No, it's interesting to hear that, actually, your take on it. Yeah. Carry on.
the bits of the Sapphire novel I'm reading, the authenticity comes through in the dialogue, well, obviously in the location.
That's good.
So you've been there and you've seen that and you've done that. I would say at the beginning of the book, you mentioned a bit of research that you've done with real people in real situations.
Yeah. Sapphire and Amber, the last 2 books in the series. So the first 3, my research was mainly, there was a series of videos by the BBC, and it was actually of the Leeds red light district. And it was watching that, I was watching that for the first book. I didn't intend to do a series. I'd had enough. I'd done 2 trilogies, and my publisher wanted another series, and I said, no, I've had enough. I just want to do standalones now. And then I started doing the research for the first book, which, like I say, I read autobiographies and that sort of thing. And I watched this series of videos, and that was an eye-opener. The lives of the girls had similarities because, you know, they'd grown up with alcoholic parents. Obviously, there was a lot of homelessness, drug addiction. There were similar features in all the lives. But at the same time, every one of these girls had a distinct personality. And the more I watched these videos, I just thought, I've got to do this. I've got to do this series with a book about, you know. So I thought of another 2 books initially. So it was going to be a series of 3. And then as time went on, I thought of another 2. But I thought, I don't want to depict the same scenarios in every book. So that was when I went to the charities. So them last 2 books, I actually went into charities in Manchester, one for the young and homeless, and the other one called MASH, which is Manchester Action on Street Health, which look after the working girls. So speaking to people there, they did try and get a working girl to have a chat with me, but that never happened. But I think I found out enough from the charities anyway. And also, having lived in Manchester all my life, you do run into those areas of the city. I mean, Piccadilly, for example, there's a big problem there with the homeless with spice. So it's, I mean, I don't know if it's as bad now, but yeah, you can walk through, it's probably the same in every city, but yeah, the particular part, Piccadilly, you walk through there and there's just people flat out on the floor because they're high on spice. So you're kind of aware of it anyway if you've lived in the city all your life like I have.
Yeah. You've got a mix there of some sort of true stories and some that you've sort of enhanced yourself. So when you start to write a new book, what do you start with? How do you start your new book, and what comes first in it? Is it a natural progression, or you go straight into the hard-hitting drama? Or
yeah, I won't say the true stories. They're all fiction, but I bring real life events into them. So, for example, where I brought, because I don't want any of these sort of gangsters to think I've based the books on them, because I haven't. These are all fictitious characters, but obviously events that have happened, such as the gang wars, I've just created my own characters as though they were involved in those scenarios. So to go back to your question, I think of an idea initially, but generally that idea is, say if I think of a girl that's going to be doing whatever, generally I'll have an idea of what sort of person she is. Like when I thought of Sapphire, I had this vision in my head, and she was going to be quite new age. I think the girl's a good depiction on the cover, but I kind of pictured her with, you know, tattoos and nose rings and with the jet black dyed hair, and and quite a kind of
goth look about her.
Feisty, and a feisty but vulnerable girl, if you know what I mean. Puts on a brave front, but she's vulnerable, so people take advantage. So I had a good, and I think the 2 go hand in hand then. You know, when people ask what comes first, the plot or the character?
Yeah.
For me, I think they go hand in hand. So, yeah.
It's a brilliant prologue, I found. It's very hard hitting. I think I mentioned to you, we were chatting on Twitter. I'm reading another book. I've since set fire to it. I was into page 300, I think, where 20 odd chapters, people are pondering things, sort of staring at each other with meaningful looks. Nothing's happened whatsoever. I'd say it's in a corner of the garden. But on prologue, on Sapphire, things happen in the first 2 pages, more than 300 pages of the book I'm just reading. So, type of book I love reading.
I sometimes do that. I start with, you know, an action scene and then kind of go back to the story that leads up to that.
Yeah, that's quite hard hitting when you... Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think as well, because in Sapphire, I wanted to show their childhood and what led to her being in that situation. And with Born Bad, I I did that as well. And although the reviews are predominantly good, you do get the odd person that says, oh, it took a while to get to the action. So I think that's where a prologue can work well, because you hook the reader straight away. So even though they might have to read 50 pages that set the scene, they know that that is coming later on in the book, if you know what I mean. So it is a good way to hook the reader in. It
sets the tone, doesn't it? And the world that they live in.
Yeah, oh yeah, they definitely know from that prologue what sort of book they're dealing with.
I was going to ask about, you mentioned earlier that you're now working on a standalone. What are the challenges? Well, actually, this is 2 questions. The challenges for writing a series of books, where I suppose that you build up a Bible. Is that, in a way, standalone writing more difficult because you're creating new characters?
I think it's going to be easier.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually working on my second standalone at the moment. So I did Guilt, which, because obviously the dates that the publishers are working with are months after you finish writing. You know, it goes through a whole process after you finish writing it. So Guilt was my first standalone, although in a way that was like writing a series, because a lot of it was based on the characters that were in the series. So my first one after that didn't take me long at all to do it. And I'm actually checking through that at the moment. But in the meantime, I like to put them to one side for a few weeks and then view them with a fresh mind. So that's what I'm doing with the next one at the moment, called Blackmail. That goes out next year. But in the meantime, I've written the first 10,000 words of the next one. I think, from what I've seen up to now, because obviously I've not done that many standalones, but from what I've seen up to now, I think series are harder. Because I'm always frightened of writing something in, say, book 3, which will vastly contradict what's happened in book 1. I do have, and this was a technique taught to me on my writing course, as well as what I call my text document, which is the actual novel. I do a character list, so that's all their characteristics, both physical and kind of emotional, if you know what I mean. I have a places list, and then I do a timeline. I call it my schedule of events, or my sequence of events. So for every scene, I'll just put a couple of lines saying what's happened, and then I'll have a column where I put all the dates when it occurred. And that's good because you can quickly recap. But even with that, and especially because I've got a dreadful memory, so I have to have all these documents. I mean, you'll find when you're talking to me, I forget what you've asked me, I'll waffle on, and then you have to bring me back to the question.
No problem. A lot of other writers call it their Bible. They build up, I think, like television series, they have a Bible, don't they? You know, they know what colour a character's eyes are, so they don't change from blue to brown in a later chapter.
Same sort of thing,
Anybody ever approached you from people like Netflix or anything about doing a series or a film? Have you had any approaches at all?
I had, my agent was approached by a television company. This was before lockdown, so I don't think anything's going to happen now. About 2.5 years ago, maybe, because it wasn't that long before COVID hit. And they were looking at Born Bad, and they wanted to adapt it. I don't know if it was film or television, but nothing came of it. So, and they were a new company that were, the 2 top men were, one was an ex-BBC director and one was an ex-director from some big company in America. And they were looking to do films or whatever. I can't even remember if it was film or TV, but from both, you know, from both British and American, but they had an interest in gritty stuff. But funnily enough, I was just checking them out the other day, and I think this, obviously, COVID must have knocked them back a bit, because with them being a new company, that must have messed things up. They only seem to be working, from what I can make out, on one project at a time. So you never know, another 10 years' time, when I'm in my dotage, might come back to me.
That'd be brilliant.
I was going to say, have you gone back to them? But you've just answered that. You'd go back to them and see if they were still interested. You know, you push it or your agent push it. You know,
it's my agent. I've just left it in her hands, and she said it often happens, and then you hear nothing, and sometimes you can hear something years later. But apparently, my agent's always kind of putting the books forward to film and TV anyway. But it's really, really difficult, isn't it, to get in? So. So I'm not really holding my hopes out. I'm more focused on trying to get the books out to as big an audience as possible.
Do you know what? I spoke to another writer who's got a series of books, detective novels, and he told me that a television company, they bought the television rights off him, paid him a decent amount of money for not to film it, just so that nobody else could buy it, because they were filming something very similar.
Really?
Yeah, and that's
Oh, well, even that'd be nice.
Well, as he said, yeah, you know, anyone get in touch if they don't want to film my work and pay me for it. Brilliant.
I'm looking for a retirement fund. I don't know. Don't care how it's funded, you know.
No. Can I ask you a cliched question? I'm probably grown. Well, I'm grown on myself even thinking about asking it. Well, when people are thinking of fiction and Manchester settings, the television series Coronation Street crops up in your mind. Weatherby, that's a fictional area. Well, the most popular soap in Britain, I think, unless it's EastEnders these days, does that have any impact or hinder, in fact, your fiction? Do people relate to it easier because that's sort of like a data, you know, a common theme on television?
Do you know what? I think Coronation Street's fabulous. It's the only soap I watch. Maybe I am slightly biased, being a Manchester girl.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But I would say the characters on there are pretty true to Manchester.
Yeah.
And also, I think the writing's fabulous because quite often, not all of it, but quite often there'll be a scene or, you know, something that's happening. And you think, God, that's quite Shakespearean the way they did that. You know, I think there are a couple of clever writers on it.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more, yeah.
Yeah, there was something I thought of for a book. I can't even remember what it was. And I just happened to be watching Corrie and I thought, bloody hell, that's the same idea as mine. And I said to my agent, this has been done on Corrie recently. Can't even remember what it was.
And he's doing Elsie Tanner and then Fairclough, was it? Or Uncle Albert?
I can't know, it was more recent. It was a couple of years back.
Yeah.
It was probably something involved with drugs, knowing my books. But it wasn't, I think because that was only a small part of the show. And I was dealing with it in a different way. And I've not copied it from the show. It was just coincidence. So I think we ran with it anyway, because obviously your treatment of it's completely different. So it wasn't going to come out the same, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you do get a lot of scenarios that are happening, don't you, in cities? You know, like your drug abuse and your gang wars and things.
Yeah, it's common, isn't it? So probably every major city in the country, in Europe, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had Shameless as well, which is based in, you know, in Manchester, and that's completely different to Corrie, but it was just as infectious. You know what I mean? It was like similar storylines, but done in a completely different way. If you know what I mean, you know. Yeah.
You know, I only ever watched a couple of them, and I don't know why, because it would be great research material.
Was that based in Wythenshawe? Shameless.
Well, originally it was based in West Gorton. That was the original location where they filmed it, which was not a million miles away from where I used to live, because I was born in Gorton. Okay. And I don't know why I can't remember why I didn't carry on watching it. But also where I was born, we had like a red wreck, and on the other side of the wreck from us, about 2 streets back, was where Myra Hindley used to live.
Oh dear.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah,
nice
I'm
neighbour.
Surrounded by it. When people ask me why I write about crime, you know, surrounded by it.
Oh dear.
So you had a red wreck as well, just like they have in Coronation Street.
Yeah. They probably based it on my old area.
wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Yeah, really wouldn't. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, where can people get your books from? Obviously, you've got them on the Amazon site, but where else? Your website?
No, I don't actually. It's a bit naff, my website, to be honest. I probably should do more with it. They're all on Amazon, but what the publishers are focusing on doing now, I was originally Aria, their imprint Aria. I was originally with Aria, and it was originally digital first, which meant that they put your book in ebook format, and it didn't necessarily go into print, or if it did, it was print on demand. Okay. What they're doing now is every book that's published is automatically going into print and audio. Yeah. So I'm on things like Audible, and 3 of my old books have gone onto another audio site. And I told you I had a bad memory. I can't remember the name of it. Also, places like Waterstones are very difficult to get in.
Yeah.
So the odd one might stock one of my books. But it is a case of, because the wholesalers, gardeners stock them, you can just ask at any Waterstones and they'll be able to get them in for you. And then there's several independent shops that are stocking them as well. They're also in libraries. I was quite chuffed to find about 3 of them in Manchester Central Library.
Did you sign them sneakily? Did you write anything on the
No,
cover?
I didn't actually.
No?
Maybe I should have done.
Leave a mark on
I
it.
just had a thought there. I wonder what it'd be like if you just sent one of your friends into Waterstones and say, "Can you get these books for me?"
Oh yeah.
To get your books in.
Yeah.
I wonder how that'd go down, or whether they would
And get
say,
them to name all 12.
I wonder whether they'd stock your books based on people going in and asking, or whether they.
I believe they do that, you know.
Yeah.
Because when I first went into Waterstones, I was told by my publishers, "Oh, you're in Waterstones," and I was absolutely over the moon. So I did a little tour of the bookshops, local, you know, the 2 in Manchester and 1 in Stockport. And there was only 1 in Manchester that was stocking them. So I went in the other one, and we, like my friends that were with me, we asked. And they said, "Oh, no, we haven't, but we were asked for that the other day, so we will be getting some in." So yeah, I know that they do that, but you have to ask. So.
Get all your mates on the phone to them.
Yeah, exactly. So just go back to when you're writing your books, and I know you base it on some facts you found on the streets and all the rest of it, although it's not based on anything in particular. How do you go about when you're thinking about writing? Do you write notes down, little notelets all over the place, or do you just get your laptop out straight away and start typing? What's your method? Or do you wake up in the middle of the night and you have a period in the night when you write, or is there another way?
Yeah, it drives me mad, actually. I call it in the zone. So initially I'll think of an idea for a book, and most times I know how it's ending, and I'll think of a couple of major events along the way. I call them events. I like to throw a few shockers in, you know, partway through the book at intervals. And then as I'm writing, once I get in the zone, I'm a real procrastinator. It takes me a while to get going, but once I'm in the zone, I can't stop. So when I come to switch the computer off, the ideas will still be flowing. And I think, no, I want my tea. So I'll just type up some notes in red italics, and this is what happens next. And this is, so the one that I'm doing at the moment, I'm about 10,000 words in, but I've got rough notes on about 6 scenes that are going to follow on from that. And I'm kind of starting to think of ideas that happen well in advance of that as well. You know, once it starts, they just come to me, and I'll wake up in the middle of the night. I'll be in the shower, I'll be on the treadmill at the gym. It's when you're most relaxed, when you come away from it. That's why I don't sort of subscribe to this this old adage of write every day. I don't believe in that. I like my weekends off because I think that if you have downtime, the ideas will come anyway. If you labour at it all the time, you just get, you know, it just doesn't happen. So I tend to find when I've switched the computer off, then the ideas, if I'm in that zone, they'll just start flowing. And I'll wake up in the middle of the night. I have a notepad in my handbag, a notepad in the office. So if I switch the computer off, I can't bother switching it back on, I'll put notes there in the office. And I have one by my bedside table. And yeah, it drives me mad because when I'm in this zone, I'll wake up at 4 and 5 o'clock and I can't get back to sleep then. Yeah. But instead of getting up and thinking I'll do it now, because I'm not a morning person, I'll lie there trying to get back to sleep, or I'll pick up a book, somebody else's book, and read it, you know, which is silly. I probably should just get up and blast it out for a few hours and then go back to bed at lunchtime. So it does mess you up a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know a couple of other authors who dedicate, as you said, you know, they have a certain time every day, like 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and they will just concentrate on writing. Then I don't know how you can do that, because the ideas, as you say, they come to you like a block, don't they, sometimes, and you've got to do it when you can. So I was just interested to see how you felt about that. And,
try to make it like a working day, because I was used to working offices before, so I like to think I do a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. But like I say, the way I get round it is the ideas aren't going to necessarily come when you sat at the computer. So the rest of the time I just make notes. And it's really lovely feeling when you've got those notes ready to go. and then it's just what I call the padding out.
Yeah.
So, for example, you might think of scene where you say, oh, she has, you know, this big revelation. And then you've got to do the actual writing part of it as a discussion, which is the boring bit in a way, you know, fill it out.
Yeah. Oh, Heather, looks like our time's it's going to run out in a couple of minutes, but it's been an absolute delight. And really appreciate your time chatting with us.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Just before you go, finally, any advice for new writers? Someone came to you as a new writer and said, where do I start? What do you say?
So for a start, I would say a writing course of some sort, or books on techniques. I know you do get a lot of authors that say it can't be taught, but I would honestly say that the skills I learned on that writing course have proved invaluable. So that's the first thing I'd say. And the second thing I would say, when it comes to publishing and marketing your work, obviously I'm now aware of these avenues through which you can get agents, which I won't go into because other authors you've interviewed that know much more about it have mentioned it. But failing that, I wouldn't be worried about publishing independently, because there seem to be a few publishers now that are snapping up independent authors, particularly in my genre. I've noticed it happen a fair bit recently. I think if you're going to publish independently, it's one thing to publish, but you also need to be noticed. And there are a lot of ways that you can do promotions on Amazon. There's a lot of information out there where you can do promotions on your books. Quite often when you're on Amazon, you have to keep at it with the publishing, with the promotion, which is where it's handy to have a publisher. When I did it as an independent, the first time I did it, my books did really well. And I thought, oh, I'll try that again. And they didn't. So it's a bit hit and miss, but yeah, it's definitely worth a try, because if you can get your books up in the ranks, it does get you noticed.
Brilliant, thanks.
Yeah. Great advice. Yeah. Well, let's keep in touch anyway, Heather. I really appreciate your time. Been great chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Been great.
Thanks a lot. Mm.